You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Jeff Garvin.
And I'm Dan Zarzana.
Let the journey begin. Happy New Year, and welcome to another episode of The Hero's Journey, where we analyze your favorite books and films using Joseph Campbell's monomyth and Christopher Vogler's modern adaptation as a guiding light.
Hey, Jeff, after a brief visit to the 1940s with last episode's look at It's a Wonderful Life, we are back in our apparently favorite decade, the 90s.
Yeah, we're stuck.
Again.
I love it.
To be fair, we did stack the deck this time with our Patreon poll. Of the three films that we had available for voting, one was from the 70s and the other two were from the 90s.
One day we'll pull apart that issue, but not this day.
We did it to ourselves.
I would have been happy to discuss all three of these films. Our theme this episode is crime dramas. And here's how the poll played out. There was no third place finisher. Tied for second were Chinatown and LA Confidential, each of which collected 29% of the vote.
And both are set in Los Angeles. I wonder if there's a little West Coast hate.
But the winner with 41% of the vote is the 1996 Coen Brothers film, Fargo.
You're starting already. Fargo's theatrical run started with a limited release on March 8th, 1996, and earned more than $60 million against its $7 million budget.
That's what I'm talking about.
The film stars Frances McDormand, William H. Macy, Harve Presnell, Steve Buscemi, and Peter Stormare.
Fargo collected a total of 7 Academy Award nominations. In addition to Best Picture, it was also up for Best Cinematography for Roger Deakins, Best Director for Joel Coen, Best Actor in a Supporting Role for William H. Macy, and Best Film Editing for Roderick Jaynes, who, like author James S.A. Corey, is a pseudonym shared by two people, Ethan and Joel Coen, which I did not know prior to this episode.
Oh, look at you.
I'm learning too. Also nominated and winning were the Coen brothers for Best Screenplay and Frances McDormand for Best Actress in a Leading Role, which was just the first of 4 Oscars she has lugged home during her career. Wow, she and her husband Joel Coen have won a total of 8 Oscars. Can you imagine their trophy case?
Yeah.
Honey, I'm home.
Oh, hi, hon. How was the award ceremony?
Well, I won another Oscar.
Oh, that's great. Well, there's no more room on the mantle. I guess we can get rid of this urn.
Oh, no, hon, those are the ashes of my beloved childhood pet.
Well, let Ethan have them for a while. It was his pet, too. Besides, he only has 4 Oscars, so he has plenty of room on his mantle.
Yeah, but...
No buts. When Trisha starts winning some awards, then we can have this conversation again. Go now. Shoo! And take your shoes off. I just vacuumed.
Oh.
Okay, Jeff, before we get into this, we need to preemptively apologize to Patreon patron Levi, who revealed to us that he is a native of North Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
And to... real good.
Oh, yeah.
And to our friend and favorite bartender, Tasha, who hails from the neighboring Minnesota, where most of this movie takes place. And to every other listener who lives in or is from the upper Midwest region of the United States. This movie has some distinctive accents, and I know that you will not be able to help yourself. In fact, you've already tried to slip one in. So Levi, Tasha, everyone else, we mean no offense.
Oh, yeah, we're real sorry about that.
Yeah.
Real sorry.
If you need a support group, maybe hook up with your fellow patron and Scotsman David Kalikas, who says he was actually amused by our idiocy during the Braveheart episode. So he can help you through this dark time.
He encouraged us. Yeah, this is all in good fun. Don't at us. As an actor, I have to try on new accents to keep the gears greased. I got to keep the craft honed. This is part of the...
Oh, are we... Jeff Garvin, actor moment. Okay, are we ready?
In the intro, ladies and gentlemen.
Reserve your room at the Blue Ox and fire up your woodchipper. I think I'm gonna barf. This is the hero's journey of Fargo. Act 1 of the hero's journey begins with the world of common day, where we see our character in their status quo normal life. Jeff Garvin, before we begin, I have to say how absolutely terrified I am of the next 15 to 20 minutes or so.
Yes.
We don't meet this film's hero, Marge Gunderson, for 33 minutes.
Right.
That is a heck of a long prologue. I struggled with this so much, but I reread Vogler, and in his chapter on the ordinary world, he does state that in a detective story, which this sort of is, a prologue includes a crime, like a murder, establishing the wrong that must be righted by the actions of the hero. With that information, I'm taking a page from your It's a Wonderful Life book and saying that the first 33 minutes of this film are prologue and ordinary world.
All right, then.
I did a whole different analysis where Act 1 ends at 33 minutes. That was the end of Act 1 because there's a very clear visual clue. And in terms of the film's structure, it is at the end of Act 1 of the film, but it's not Act 1 of the hero's journey. So this screenplay, thank you, Ethan and Joel Cohen, completely divorce the 3-act structure of a film and the 3-act structure of the hero's journey.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of went in expecting that. Looking at this film for the first time through the hero's journey, I've obviously seen this film many times. It's because it came out in the 90s, so I had nothing better to do than watch films over and over and over again. And I love that the Coen brothers, there's always something unusual about the film. The fact that we don't meet Marge until 30 minutes into the film plays into another thing that they do, which is almost every movie is an ensemble cast, and every character is rich with their own story, their own backstory, their own world. So I actually picked out mostly elements for most of the characters in the story. And as we don't meet Marge until the 30th minute of the movie, or 33 minutes in, the other characters have all sorts of stuff going on because their journeys begin before Marge's does. And it's interesting because Frances McDormand won Best Actress, but
leading role.
I would guess that her screen time is probably less than William H. Macy's in this movie. I'd have to count it up. But we see an awful lot of William H. Macy in this movie, who I adore.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I agree with you. Marge is the lead character, and everything that happens before we meet her is prologue. And I'll probably pepper in some other character moments for their journeys in what is Act 1 of the film structure.
All right, I guess we'll begin. Jerry Lundegaard is towing a brand new burnt umber Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra across the frozen tundra from Minneapolis to Fargo, North Dakota. And here we are treated to Carter Burwell's beautiful score for Fargo.
Oh, so
my wife and I are both fans of Carter Burwell. In fact, if you remember, she walked down the aisle to Carter Burwell's A Man in His Hat from another Coen Brothers film, Miller's Crossing, which is that piece of music. If you're unfamiliar with it, listeners, Google Carter Burwell, A Man in His Hat. It is a gorgeous piece of music. I absolutely love it. One of my favorite pieces of film music of all time. So Lundegaard pulls into the parking lot of the King of Clubs, a dive bar in Fargo, North Dakota. He steps inside the bar and meets up with Carl Showalter, played by Steve Buscemi, and Geir Grimsrud, played by Peter Stormare. This was Stormare's breakout American role.
Fun stuff about him in the tidbits.
So this meeting has been set up by somebody named Shep Proudfoot, a character we'll meet later.
I'm Jerry Lundegaard.
You're Jerry Lundegaard?
Yeah. Shep Proudfoot said...
Shep said you'd be here at 7:30. What gives, man?
Shep said 8:30.
We've been sitting here an hour. He's peed 3 times already.
So already, this relationship is off to a rocky start. Jerry needs money, and he wants Carl and Geir to kidnap his wife, because he's sure that his wealthy father-in-law will pay what he tells them is an $80,000 ransom that he will then split with them. He'll keep $40,000 and they'll keep $40,000 for themselves.
Yeah.
And we don't know this yet, but he's already lying.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I have not watched this movie in its entirety for several years. I've caught bits and pieces of it over the decades. This is the first time in quite some time that I've actually sat down and watched it start to finish.
Yeah.
Jerry is...
Yeah, he's a lying liar who lies to everyone.
Yeah. So when I started doing this analysis, I started writing it for Jerry.
Me too.
And then I got partway through. I thought, no, this isn't right. Really, this is Marge's journey. Jerry is an antagonist in this film. So I redid the whole thing. I scrapped it and started all over. Okay, back home in Minnesota, Jerry discovers that his father-in-law, played by Harve Presnell, is over for dinner. And Jerry asks him, his name is Wade, Jerry asks Wade if he's thought about this business opportunity that Jerry pitched him. 40 acres of land for $750,000 because he wants to put in a parking lot. That seems like a pretty big parking lot, 40 acres.
And an expensive, well, I don't know how much it costs to build a parking lot, but it seems like grade it and pave it.
And Wade says he's had a couple of parking lots in the 50s and he lost a lot of money. And Jerry says, yeah, but this could work out real well for him and Gene and Scotty. And Wade replies, Gene and Scotty never have to worry.
So
Ouch.
cold.
Cuts him out. It's obvious right now that Wade doesn't care for his son-in-law.
Yeah.
And yet trusts him to run his car dealership, though. Nepotism, wow. All right, speaking of the car dealership, we now cut to said car dealership. A moment of appreciation here for the Coen brothers. There is a shot of the break room wall where you see this series of portraits of men in suits, and it looks like the Republican side of the U.S. Senate. It's all just old white men. There is a shot of the coffee maker, and there's a crumpled Sweet and Low packet on the counter and a spoon that's just sitting there. Obviously, somebody stirred their coffee and just left the spoon on the counter.
Yeah.
Having worked in places with break rooms for as long as I have, it triggered me. It was so exactly like, God damn it, people are so messy.
Pile of coffee
Clean
mugs
up
in the
your
sink.
Stuff. I guarantee you there was a trash can 2 feet away. Just throw it. Ugh.
Oh, Dan got triggered. I'm sorry, Dan. Just good set decoration.
I don't work there anymore. No, it was very good. It was so well done.
Also, that portrait wall, they show details, but then they cut to Jerry's face, is one of many visual tips to The Shining in this film.
Yes.
Because it reminds me of that shot at the end of The Shining where you see Jack Nicholson at the party. Anyway, that just reminded me of The Shining. And there's a couple more things in this movie that remind me.
There was one other potential nod to The Shining that I saw, and also a couple of other references to other Kubrick films.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear them.
Now we're back in the car with Carl and Gair, and they're driving to the Twin Cities. And Gair wants to go to Pancake's house. We stop at Pancake's house.
Yeah.
Carl is trying to strike up a conversation. Gair's not having it. This Gair dude is menacing.
Yeah, something's wrong.
Carl suggests that they stop at a little place that he knows where they can get some pancakes and get laid. And it seems like that's a inconsequential little conversation, but it does come up later.
Yeah.
Now we're back with Jerry at the car dealership. He receives a call from Riley Diefenbach at GMAC. It's not known by that anymore, but that was GM's financing company. And it seems that Jerry is embezzling $320,000 using fake vehicle loan applications. And Mr. Diefenbach is asking for the serial numbers of those vehicles because the copy that he received is illegible. And Jerry ducks and weaves and stalls for time. So it's clear that Jerry has gotten himself in over his head.
This is the part where I started doing math. Because I'm like, okay, he's into GMAC for $320,000.
Uh-huh.
He wants the $750,000 for the parking lot, and he wants the $1 million ransom minus $40K for Gair and Carl. That's like $2 million. And we never find out what he's done or who he owes the money to or any of that. It's wow, he's in deep, deep trouble.
I love that you never find out what he's doing.
Yeah.
That's great. You don't need to know.
Yeah.
I also forgot to mention that Jerry has an altercation with a customer who is here to pick up his car, and they put that Drew coat on at the factory. And
that's the scene I remember when I think of this movie.
These guys.
Yeah. And anyone who's ever bought a car has been through that at a dealership.
You lied to me, Mr. Lundegaard. While this is happening, Carl and Gair break into the Lundegaard house, kidnap Jean, played by Kristen Rudrud. Her accent, I don't know if this is the way she speaks. She actually is from Fargo, North Dakota.
I know.
I don't know if she was exaggerating.
Oh, hi, Dad.
Jerry around.
Yeah. Hi? Yeah, Yeah, he's here. Yeah, I'll catch him for you. Hun,
Yeah.
it's Dad.
But yeah, when you watch the movie, you're like, of all the accents, that's the one that feels like, oh, maybe it's a little over the top.
That's a
Nope,
little
she's
cartoon.
from Fargo. Love it.
Oh, and here's where we get another reference to The Shining. Jean runs upstairs, hides in the bathroom, and Carl tries to break through the door.
Right,
Very
right.
much like Jack breaking through the bathroom door in The Shining.
Here's Carl.
All from this point on, Kristen Rudrud has something over her face the entire time. Wow. It's either the shower curtain or it's the backwards balaclava.
Oh,
And
squealing and
she goes running, screaming, falls down the stairs, gets knocked out, kidnapped.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Jerry
Wow.
meets with what? What do you keep saying? Wow.
No, I got some, not sure I'd agree with all your analysis work there, Dan. I think we're in lockstep with Marge. So when I get to my sections, I'll just pepper in the stuff that I see for Jerry and Geyer and Carl.
Why do you have journeys written out for all of these characters?
There are many films where we've seen ensemble casts or where we've seen anti-hero stories. I think you could make a good case for this being the tragedy of Jerry Lundegaard. Carl and Geyer have a journey. I think that's one of the things that makes Coen Brothers movies so rich, is that it's not simply the story of one person, but the stories of this whole ensemble of cast members clashes together and makes for a much richer movie than if the movie started with triple homicide, cut to Marge. And so I agree, Marge is the main protagonist, but I think it's interesting to look at the stories of the other characters. So we agree on Marge, and so far I think you and I are on the same page. But I also think there's some significant, and like you said,
How did I know this was going to happen?
well, and like you said, it's unusual to introduce the main character in Act 2 of the film. And from a film structure perspective, I think there are elements that occur in that first 30 minutes of the film. I mean, we're kind of flip-flopping from It's a Wonderful Life, where you really kind of took an unusual approach where you talked about Clarence receiving the call to adventure and that whole opening sequence. So yeah, I mean, this isn't a problem. This is just two different peeks into how you might see the hero's journey manifested in a film. So again, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Well, you keep going, wow. Like, you can't believe what you're hearing. So, okay, why don't we do this? Because we're already...
I think you're misinterpreting my wow there.
Clarify the wow then for me.
I'm not saying that's unusual. That's so wrong. I'm just, I don't know. I'm just reacting.
You disagree with me. You said, I don't think I agree with your analysis there.
Well, I was just quoting the movie, but there are places where I'm going to go back to something you said for Ordinary World and just tweak it for a different, in a different section.
Okay, Jerry returns home to a trashed house. His wife is missing. Maybe he can salvage the situation after all.
Yeah.
His financial problems, he thought, were going to be solved when Wade and his accountant, Stan Grossman, said, we're interested in this land deal now. We've looked at the numbers. They look pretty good. What's your finder's fee? And Jerry misunderstood the whole thing. He wanted the entire principal of $750,000. We're not a bank, Jerry.
He is not sophisticated in the ways of finance.
Yeah. So there's that great scene of him scraping ice off his windshield after the meeting, and then he freaks out and starts smacking his windshield with the... He's completely losing it. He's realizing what he has done to himself, and all of the opportunities that he had are slipping away, except now he's got the ransom possibility. Mm-hmm. So that's his last chance.
Mm-hmm.
Carl reveals more of his incompetence when he and Geyer are driving across the tundra in the dark, and they get pulled over outside Brainerd by the Minnesota State Highway Patrol because he forgot to put on the new tags of this car. So here's some mentorship, kids. If you're committing a crime, make sure your getaway vehicle is squared away. So Carl tries to bribe the cop. You step out of the car, please, sir. By the way, do you remember... in 97, it was the year after this came out, there was a Star Wars fan film by Kevin Rubio called Troops, which was a cops parody with stormtroopers.
Yeah.
The main stormtrooper that's being interviewed, he has a upper Midwest accent.
Oh, wow. I didn't remember that at all. That's amazing, Dan.
I joined the Empire about 6 years ago. I can remember as a kid, watching the holographic images and being excited about the new direction that the galaxy was taking. So when I was old enough, I went down to the local recruitment center, and signed up.
Great tie-in.
And that came out a year after Fargo, so I wonder if it was a reference to Fargo. Anyway.
Yeah.
Cop asks Carl to get out of the car. Geier's not having it. Shoots the dude in the head. So as they're trying to clean up the scene, another car drives by. They see Carl dragging the trooper's body off the road. Geier jumps into the driver's seat, takes off after them. Execution style, Carl kills them both. And I originally thought that when Geier fires the shot at the woman in the car, we cut to black for 8 seconds. Very clear indication that was the end of Act 1 in terms of film structure.
Yeah.
And in terms of my original analysis, that's where I ended Act 1 of the hero's journey as well. Then we get a little look at Marge. She's in bed with her husband sleeping. The camera pans across their bedroom. We see like an artist station. There's paints.
Lots of ducks.
Lots of ducks, yes. And I'll leave it there because that's the introduction to Marge, right before she gets her call to adventure. Okay, Jeff. I said that was going to be a long segment.
Yeah, and in fact, we're about a little over 30 minutes into the recording of this section,
That's
about when Marge shows up.
I'm going to have to cut half of that. I'm so sorry, listeners.
Minute for minute, we're going to do the movie. All right, so that brings us to Call to Adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders them unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. I think we both agree that Marge Gunderson's call is quite literal. The phone rings early one morning, and she is summoned to a crime scene. This is also when we meet Norm, and I love Norm so much.
Isn't Norm just a teddy bear?
He's just the greatest. I mean, he's this creative guy who's married to the woman with the steady job, and he dotes on her, and he makes her breakfast, and he brings her lunch, and he craves her approval. I'm not sure why I relate so hard to him, but it's weird.
I do too.
And then, I'm Norm. I am Norm. And I had this one of my favorite shots or sequences in this whole film. He insists on feeding Marge a breakfast. Meanwhile, she is supposed to be at the scene of a triple homicide, but he's like, no, you got to eat a breakfast, Margie. Mm-hmm. So he makes her like a full breakfast, and she eats a couple bites like, okay, now I got to go. And there's one shot where she gets up and she waddles out the door. Norm pulls her plate to his side of the table and finishes her breakfast. She walks all the way out to the car. We stay in that wider shot where you can see Norm at the breakfast nook and her walking to the car. She comes back in and says, Prowler needs a jump. This is what makes this movie so great to me, is the slice of life moments of these characters. Like you said, we're 30 minutes into the movie and there's no detective work going on yet, but we get to see who all these people are, what their lives are like. Unlike every other detective movie when it's, you get to see a peek here and a peek there of their backstory. No, we see a full portrait of Marge's home life before we ever see her do detective work. And it makes her detective work that much more surprising because she seems like this sort of simple, humble person. And then we get to see her go to work, and it's badass.
Also, you said Marge waddles.
Yeah.
This is because she's very pregnant. She is 7 months pregnant.
So I did see some calls to adventure for the other characters too. And obviously this happens off screen where Geier, not Carl, gets a call from Shep, who's the mechanic at Gustafson Motors, who calls him to meet with Jerry. So we don't see that happen, but that would be the call to adventure of the bad guys. And then ostensibly Carl receives a call from Geier, who recruits him for the job, right? And then Jerry, we never, like you said, never find out what he's done to get into so much debt that he's trying to grab $2 million. But he starts his own adventure when he decides that his path out of financial trouble is to have his wife kidnapped. So that's what I saw as Call to Adventure. Are we on track with Marge?
Yeah. Next segment is refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, the call is refused either directly by the hero or by external forces. Now, in terms of Marge's journey, I thought that the rest of the hero's Act 1 adventure takes place in about 5 minutes. It's very fast to catch her up to the rest of the film. And then I
Okay.
saw a pretty much sequential progression of the hero and the film's act structure, except there are a couple of moments for, I thought, Marge, unless I completely missed it, where some elements don't even happen to her. They happen to other characters, but those fit the journey. So I
agree with
I think
that.
we'll probably agree once we get there. I think you can probably anticipate what I'm talking about. So anyway, what I saw was, and you already mentioned it, Marge goes out to her police cruiser and needs a jump start. She can't get to this triple homicide scene because her prowler won't start.
Yeah.
So that was a refusal from without. Beyond that, Marge is the chief of police of the Brainerd Police Department. There's no refusal from her.
Yeah.
Maybe a refusal from without is Norm delaying her a little bit by
you gotta eat a
making her
breakfast.
eat breakfast. You got
Yes.
to eat I'll make you some eggs. But I didn't see any refusal from Marge at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. By the way, I say to Ami at least once a week, Margie, you got to eat a breakfast. Like that's...
Do you really?
Yeah, because she forgets to, she just gets up and, I got to go. And I'm like, Margie, you got to eat a breakfast.
That's so you are Norm.
I'm so Norm. I see refusal for the other guys. Jerry gets refusal from without. He shows up to the meeting and wants them to do the job, but Carl wants the money up front. Of course, now that we know Jerry a little bit, he probably did tell Shep that they'd get the money up front, and now he's doing the bait and switch because he's the bait and switcher. Like that is what he does. Oh yeah, well, come pick up the car. It's just how you ordered it. Oh, except it has the True Coat, which you have to pay for. Like that's what he does. He's a lying liar who lies.
Yep.
And that's Carl and Gaier's refusal coming from Jerry, who shows up and changes the deal and says they won't get the money till after they paid. So I think their refusal happens for both of them from each other in that scene. Well, that brings us to meeting with the mentor, where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. Wow. I hope you have something good here because, Margie wakes up and goes right to the crime scene and then into her investigation. So I struggle with this. I saw a couple things for Jerry. Carl actually is the one who says, your plan is stupid. It's going to get you in trouble. You should just ask your father-in-law or your wife for money. What did you have for mentor moments?
Mine are real simple, and we've already talked about one of them. Norm saying you got to eat a breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a very small meeting with the mentor. It doesn't affect Marge at all. It's not supernatural aid, but I thought it was a cute moment of this domesticity.
I agree.
And then the rest of the mentorship was provided by Marge herself to Officer Lou.
Mm-hmm.
She's the chief of police. Marge is the one who is guiding Lou with her hypothesis.
Yeah.
There's the whole dealer plates thing that he gets wrong. And she gives him another perspective and makes him go, oh, geez.
Yeah. She's so sharp. Right when she gets to the crime scene, she's figured out what happened just by seeing the bodies and the footprints. She's a badass detective. I really like that scene. So it was surprising to me the first time I saw it because everyone else in this film so far has been so bumbling. And I thought, oh, this is one of those Coen Brothers movies where everybody's Jar Jar and they just accidentally, get themselves into trouble and back out again. But then she shows up. Marge and Norm are sort of the only competent people in this movie. They really are. Everyone else is just horrible screw-ups.
All right, next segment and the final segment of Act 1 is crossing the first threshold, where the hero passes a barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. Marge arrives at the scene. Officer Lou hands her a cup of coffee. She steps off the road into the snow to begin her investigation. I love how she stumbles a little bit. Her boot dips into the snow and she stumbles and looks back at Lou like, whoa,
yeah,
watch your step there, Margie.
Yeah.
That was the crossing of the threshold. She crosses from the asphalt into the snow, which is a big environmental element of this entire film is snow.
Yeah.
That was the crossing of the first threshold for me.
Oh,
so
I love
now
that.
we have caught up Marge to the rest of the film. Now both of them are right at the beginning of Act 2.
Yeah, no, I didn't have the asphalt to snow thing. I love that. But I did have the same thing. She crosses the threshold when she starts her investigation.
Okay.
The only thing I had for Jerry, Carl, and Gair, the kidnapping itself is the commitment. Now they're in. And I just have to call out.
There's no undoing that.
Right, yeah. I just have to call out Peter Stormare and the Coen brothers. After, I forget what exactly happens, does Jerry's wife bite him on the hand?
Yes.
And he's, unguent. I need unguent. He becomes completely disinterested in the kidnapping and is just focused on getting unguent for his hand. Again, just not only informative of the character, but of the world that we're in. I love that. I love that. Well, that does bring us to the end of Act 1.
Now we go to Pancake's house.
Dan, welcome to Pancake's house, where we discuss how we've been pursuing our bliss over the past month. Dan, what have you been doing, watching, reading, playing?
All kinds of stuff.
Ooh.
After a pretty sleepy November, December, I did a bunch of stuff. Read a couple books. I finished 4 video games that I had been in the middle of. That I just kind of been plugging my way throughout the year, and I finished all 4 of them in December.
Holy cow.
I also watched 4 seasons. Okay, I watched season 7 of Bosch, season 1 of The Wheel of Time, season 2 of The Witcher. I watched The Matrix Resurrections. I watched the new Aaron Sorkin film, Being the Ricardos, which is great. It's about 1 week in the life of Lucy and Desi, and you get a really great backstory on who they were as real people, not their on-screen personas.
And so Javier Bardem, right? As
he was
Ricky
fantastic.
Ricardo.
Also,
gotta see it.
Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball, amazing.
Wow, okay.
She was really, really great. Even my wife, who isn't the biggest Nicole Kidman fan, said she just disappeared. She was watching Lucy.
Wow.
Really, really great. But the main thing I want to talk about is I watched season 1 of Hunters on Amazon Prime. Are you familiar with this show?
Not at all.
It takes place in the 70s, I think 1977 specifically, in New York. It is about a group of Jewish people who hunt Nazis who emigrated to the United States after World War II.
I've heard of this show. Yeah.
It was fascinating. Wild shifts in tone. 1 minute, there are Schindler's List levels of seriousness and dreariness. And then in the next minute, you've switched wildly to these Tarantino levels of flashy style and violence while you're mixing in these early 90s Kevin Smith comic book conversations.
Oh my God.
It was so jarring, but fascinating at the same time. I highly recommend it.
You've sold me. That sounds amazing. Everything you just mentioned, I want to see. Can you just drop in the names of the games you finished, though? I'm super curious.
Oh, okay. The Outer Worlds, which is a sci-fi game developed by Obsidian, who made Fallout New Vegas, is one that you might be familiar with. I think they made Pillars of Eternity.
Yeah.
So it is a first-person game, so there's a Falloutiness of it, but you're in space. Humanity has traveled to another star system to try to colonize. But it's funny. It's all about corporate greed and the exploitation of workers and things like that. But it's very humorous. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I finished.
Ooh.
3 days after that, I finally finished a game called Bound by Flame, which is made by French developer Spiders. I got all the way up to the final boss battle. I couldn't beat it. And I just beat my head up against it for days and days and days. I couldn't find the rhythm.
Yeah.
And I gave up on it. And then I went back. I think finishing these other 2 games, I was emboldened. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try.
Nice.
And it took me maybe an hour or so to get to remember the game's controls. And then to examine the patterns and whatnot established by the main boss. And then I finally beat that. So that was a very satisfying moment. I was afraid that was going to be one of those games that I just had to shelve without finishing it, which is not something I like to do. And then a few days ago, I finished Rage 2, which is like Doom meets Fallout. So weird. That's the second Fallout reference I've made. But those make sense because the game is published by Bethesda, who developed Fallout 3 and 4 and published Fallout New Vegas, and id Software, who made all the Doom games.
You saw the influence. Plus Fallout, the whole Fallout series has been incredibly influential on video games in general, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Even going back to the first two, which were top-down isometric games, and then Fallout 3 was a first-person game in the style of the Elder Scrolls, like Skyrim and whatnot, because that's the same developer now. But Bethesda made both of those series. They took over Fallout with Fallout 3, and then they've made the entire Elder Scrolls series. So, yeah, very cross-contamination, cross-pollination, probably a better word there. And here's where we tie this discussion into the episode, the original Fallout, developed by Brian Fargo. I'm not making that up.
I have been so slammed with trying to get my life in order that I didn't do a lot of anything. I did watch some Christmas stuff. I watched a movie I'd never seen before called The Man Who Invented Christmas. This was a 2017 movie directed by Bharat Nalluri. It stars Dan Stevens as Charles Dickens, Christopher Plummer as Scrooge, but the vision of Scrooge that Dickens has in his head, and Jonathan Pryce as Dickens' father. So this movie is about Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol. So it's like Shakespeare in Love meets A Christmas Carol. I really loved it. It's about a writer and his struggles to finish something on deadline and keep his life together. So of course I enjoyed that. And that Shakespeare in Love quality was really satisfying. So I recommend it next Christmas. If you're looking for a new kind of Christmas movie that you haven't seen, I recommend The Man Who Invented Christmas. And I also learned some things about modern day Christmas tradition that Dickens really had an influence on that he put in the book that I did not know. And I don't want to spill those things now because it's part of the charm of the movie.
Well, put it on next December's poll, and maybe the listeners will choose it as the hero's journey for December.
It's an unusual. And so in keeping with that, my wife gave me years ago the audiobook A Christmas Carol, read by Jim Dale, who also narrates the Harry Potter series. Yeah. So we listened to that in the car with the kids during all our holiday driving around, and it's fantastic. I had never read A Christmas Carol. It is delightful. It's funny and spooky, and it was fun to see what was different about it than all the movie versions that have been made. Mm-hmm. So coupled with The Man Who Invented Christmas, I really got a fun peek into Dickens. I think I'm going to read a Dickens novel this year just to get into it.
Hey, talk to my mom. She just read the entire Charles Dickens library. She just finished. So chat with her. Maybe she'll tell you the best Dickens book to read.
Well, he's been called the Shakespeare of the novel, and I was listening for that, and there are actually many lines in A Christmas Carol that are in iambic pentameter, and I don't know if that's on purpose, but the lilt of his writing when read aloud is beautiful. And part of that's just Jim Dale is an incredible narrator. Okay, I finished 2 books. 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. The first book I've ever read from hearing it on the Sam Harris podcast, Making Sense. I did not like it at all. It was 99% complaining about conventional time management strategy and why it doesn't work. And I listened to the audiobook, the last 4.5 minutes were, here's a list of tips on how you can manage your time. I just thought it was, ironically, a waste of time. I almost didn't finish it 4 times, and I said, no, I've got to finish it. Sometimes nonfiction books have to have a subtitle, and the subtitle of this book should have been Why Time Management Doesn't Work, not Time Management. So the idea is that you have 4,000 weeks in your life. How are you going to spend them? And it was bad. Did not enjoy it at all. Don't recommend it.
Okay. I had a similar experience with one of the books I read.
Oh, which one?
This Fight is Our Fight by Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
The subtitle of that is The Fight to Save America's Middle Class. It was similarly, 99% was, here's all the things that we've tried to do to save America's middle class and how our opposition has squashed them and how you're all screwed. And then the last few pages are, but here's some things that you can do. But I've just read 300 pages of you saying how nothing helps. I feel like maybe she intended for people to finish the book and be fired up and pissed off and inspired to do something. I just felt complete and utter despair.
You were dead inside afterwards?
I respect and I admire Senator Warren, but I don't recommend this book.
Maybe if she'd read 4,000 Weeks, she would have.
All right. You were gonna mention one more thing. I interrupted you.
My final thing, I was recommended this book, and it's a 31-hour audiobook.
Wow.
And this is a book from the 90s called Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. Dan, this is the sexiest book I have ever read in my life.
That's what I've heard.
Oh, damn. It's sexy. And inside of the book, it's an epic fantasy. And the fantasy world is very realized. Instead of being based on like British culture, everything is very French. And there's, inter-house intrigue. There's barbarians, and there's a strange pantheon of religious figures that influence, but the main character is Phaedra, and she is cursed to experience pain and pleasure as the same thing. So she's basically a masochist, and she has been sold into sexual servitude, but it's a weird, prestige thing. And so her goal is she's trying to earn her freedom back. And I was not prepared for this book. It's definitely not a 21st century look at gender relations, but I had to finish it, even though I didn't really enjoy the fantasy elements as much. But if you're looking for an epic fantasy, ultra sexy read, I mean, really well-written sexy stuff, Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. Holy cow.
And now we eat pancakes.
Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with tests, allies, enemies, the road of trials. Now in the special world, our hero makes allies, meets enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove his worthiness. As far as allies and enemies go, for Marge, we've got Norm, Lou, Officer Olson and the cops in Bismarck, and basically all the law enforcement.
Bismarck?
Yeah, they catch up with
at the
Jerry.
very end.
And then,
okay, right.
Law enforcement, enemies, the suspects of the crime, Geyer, Carl, and Jerry.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I had for Marge. For Carl and Geyer, everyone starts out as an enemy or becomes one after having shifted shapes.
Yeah.
Shep is an ally at first. He calls him into the job, but becomes an enemy to beat the snot out of Carl. And same with Carl and Geyer for each other. They start out as allies, but they do not stay allies. For Jerry, he's kind of alone. Shep, Carl, and Geyer are shapeshifters at best. Even Scotty, his own son, is just sort of a hindrance.
Huh? What does Scotty do?
Oh, he doesn't. It's what he wants to call people and be sad about and Jerry's like, don't call anyone. No, don't get. He's like, Scotty's just another wild card. He's another variable for Jerry. He doesn't. I don't think he actively tries to stop him, but he's just one of those. He's a force that makes things more complicated for Jerry. And at one point, he's totally forgotten about how his son might react to his mother's kidnapping. Stan's like, hey, is Scotty going to be okay? And Jerry's like, oh, yeah, Scotty.
Oh, yeah. I'll go check on
probably
Scotty.
go. That wasn't even in his calculus for how staging his wife's kidnapping was going to go.
No, this is how awful Jerry is.
He's a terrible, terrible person. Stan Grossman starts out as a possible ally. He kind of is the guy who is a proponent of his pitch and says, yeah, man, we shouldn't get the cops involved. But then he changes course. So he's a shapeshifter. Wade is definitely an enemy for Jerry. He is against Jerry about everything the whole time. That's what I see as allies and enemies. Tests. Okay, so the tests for Marge occur as she investigates the homicides and she passes the test. And I could go blow by blow and list them, but they're sort of typical cop procedural investigation stuff. You know, she interviews people and she goes and checks out tips. One of the things that is interesting to me is that in a thriller, in a crime movie, usually the interest is the tension of when and how the bad guys will get caught and what danger our hero is going to get themselves into. And I never feared for Marge's life until that big sequence at the very end. And I think what makes her investigation interesting and not typical is the wacky, offbeat characters and personalities she encounters and the world that she's in. So, and the antics of the bad guys in the scenes where Marge doesn't appear.
Yeah.
You had said early on that some of the parts of the journey really occur with other characters. So while I agree Marge is tested, to me, it's Jerry's tests that make the movie really compelling as we watch his plans unravel. And there are a couple of escalating subplots that show up as tests as Jerry tries everything he can to get money to pay off his mysterious debt. And you've mentioned them all. You know, Jerry trying to get Wade to invest in the money, and then that goes bad because they just want to take the deal for themselves and pay him a finder's fee, and that's not enough. And, you know, we see him start to come apart with the windshield ice scraping scene. And then the other subplot is he's calling in loans on imaginary cars. And then you mentioned the True Coat scene.
You know what? You talked about earlier about doing math.
Yeah.
That scene, we also learn that the car is worth $19,500.
Right.
Which comes into play at the very end of the movie. Not the car that those two people are buying, but the car that Jerry gives
you're right. They argue
to Carl and Guyer.
How the hell did we split a car?
So that's important for that scene, is that you establish that dollar value for the car. But there's also a little scene that comes in later during this segment of the film that calls back the True Coat.
Yes.
When there's another guy shopping for a car and he's trying to upsell him on the True Coat, and the guy says, yeah, I don't want that. And Jerry says, yeah, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Like, he's already, like, that guy's going to come back to pick up his car, and he's going to have to argue with him about the True Coat again.
$500.
He's doing the same thing. He is a con man.
Yeah. So I think that's the real purpose of that scene, is to establish that Jerry's a con man. And a very, like, he appears very bumbling and sort of, put upon, but he's a shyster. So that's what I had for tests.
I think there's one thing that we ought to highlight, and I think we mentioned it earlier, but when Jerry is meeting with Wade and Stan at the diner, it's revealed that now the ransom, which Jerry told Carl and Guyer was $80,000,
right,
is now $1 million. Jerry has told Wade that these guys want $1 million to get Gene back.
You could speculate for 100 years about what he did to get in this debt, and it doesn't matter. He's just desperate.
The next segment is Approach to the Inmost Cave, where the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of their quest is hidden. Wade has demanded to be a part of this ransom drop-off. Jerry has been telling Wade and Stan that these kidnappers are dangerous men, and they have stipulated that they deal only with Jerry. They don't want anybody listening in. But Wade, he says, no, this is my money, my daughter. I'm going to be a part of this drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is part of Jerry's plan falling apart. Carl steals a license plate from airport long-term parking, gets into an altercation with the lot attendant when he tries to leave without paying.
Yes.
Yeah, I decided not to park here. I love that scene. But it also sets up the fate of the parking lot attendant later.
Yeah.
And Carl's relationship with parking lot attendants.
No grace period at this lot.
Marge her leads have now led her to the Gunderson car dealership. And she is there interviewing Shep Proudfoot. And she puts him together with the two suspects and leans on him a little bit and says, I know that you're on parole. You've got some violent items on your record, but nothing approaching homicide. So don't hang yourself here. Work with me.
Yeah.
This sends Shep Proudfoot after Carl, whips him with his own belt, and
he even kicks the prostitute in the butt as she's trying to run away. He's so pissed.
Beats up the neighbor who's like, hey, can you keep it down in there as he comes out?
He's got a little gayer in him, I think.
Oh, we were talking about Stanley Kubrick references.
Mm-hmm.
I think right before this Shep beating up Carl scene, when Carl is at the Jose Feliciano show with the escort that he has hired for the night.
Uh-huh.
And she asks him why he's in town, and he says, "Oh, just a little in and out," which is maybe a reference to A Clockwork Orange.
Yes. Oh, yes.
A bit of the old in
Absolutely.
out, in out.
Yeah.
Oh, the other Kubrick reference was way earlier when Carl and Gair are in the car, and on the radio is "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'," which was a song that was also featured in Full Metal Jacket.
Bingo.
Catching us up again to Approach to the Inmost Cave. Now, Carl, who has just had his butt whipped by Shep, calls Jerry angry. He wants this done, over. I want my money. 30 minutes. You meet me at the top level of the Dayton-Radisson parking ramp. Wade is listening on the other line, grabs the briefcase full of cash, and heads out the door without Jerry. And as he's driving to the location, we see him loading a revolver
and
in
practicing
the
his
car.
lines just like Jerry did.
Just like Jerry did.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That is where I drew the end of Inmost Cave. There's one little moment, though, that fits in this sequence of events is Marge's lunch or dinner. I couldn't figure out what time of day it was.
Oh, yes.
With Mike Yamagita.
Yeah.
It is so awkward. He's this guy that she knew from high school.
Oh, and then I saw you on the TV, and I remembered, I always liked you.
Well, I always liked you.
I always liked you so much.
And he tells this BS story about this other girl that they both knew from school, and he was married, but she died of leukemia, and just trying to build up the sympathy from Marge, and he's trying to get his arm around her, and just such an awkward, uncomfortable scene. I don't know why that scene is in them. It could have been cut for time. But
for sure,
again,
yeah.
It's such a juicy, quirky Coen Brothers scene.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think, is there something about this scene that makes Marge do something else afterward? Like, oh, well, that didn't sound right. And I don't know. It doesn't send her on a different path, I don't think.
What I read was that the Coen brothers had stated that they wanted to show Marge outside of her relationship with Norm or the investigation. They wanted to give a piece of what Marge was like outside. And I was surprised. She kind of gets gussied up for this meeting. And I kind of went, why did she meet this guy? Like, he calls her in the middle of the night. She stays on the phone with him, even though it's the middle of the night, and has this conversation with him, and then goes to meet him. It was just like, did she have a crush on this guy too? Like,
I don't think so.
She's so faithful to Norm, but she meets the guy.
I think that it's an innocence. I don't think she thought there was anything going on. She was just meeting a guy that she knew from high school.
I agree.
It was a reunion thing. I don't think there was anything romantic at all. She's just, she's just a lady who put on a nice dress and did her hair to go meet an old friend from school.
I agree that in the present she doesn't have any romantic intentions. I just wonder what their high school relationship was like. Not that they had a romantic relationship, just that why was he important enough for her to stay on the phone in the middle of the night and go meet him? I think that question mark isn't answered, but it's certainly a question. If someone
Does it show how kind she is? Because think about how awkward that conversation is, and he breaks down and starts crying, and she's like, it's okay, and
well, she looks profoundly uncomfortable as he's breaking down.
She does, but she doesn't just say, okay, you know what, we're done here, I'm leaving, you're making me uncomfortable.
You're such a super lady.
I'm just trying to think, if someone I knew from high school of the opposite sex called me in the middle of the night and I was in bed with Ami, first of all, this was before caller ID, so she couldn't just dodge the call because she's on call because she's a cop. So I get why she took the call. But to stay on the phone with that person for so long and then show up to meet them, I don't know. That's unusual to me. That doesn't seem like consistent with what we know of Marge so far. And it led me to believe there's something more to her, whatever it is. And I think that's what the Coen brothers were doing with showing more of Marge.
It just shows that she's really a kind lady to other people when she's not grilling a suspect. She's nice to everybody else.
I think we see that in lots of other places in the movie. So I don't know that explains the scene or that it makes it necessary. But they left it in for some reason. I don't know. But it also shows from the Coen brothers that they Like, I can imagine a studio exec saying, cut that scene, it's worthless, but they kept it.
You often say that when we did Prince of Thieves, and you say, I always say to my wife, hello, my lover. And you said earlier in this episode that you say to Ami often, you got to have a breakfast. Well, I often say to Michelle, you're such a super lady.
Okay.
So
that justifies it completely then.
That's why I like the scene in the movie.
I love that.
You're such a super lady.
Well, Dan, that brings us to Ordeal, where the hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome their worst fears, sometimes appearing to die.
Yeah,
now,
real good now.
You always beat me up when I talk about delayed crisis, okay? But this is...
That is untrue.
You do.
You're the one who beats me up every time I come up with a delayed crisis. How dare you? You go back and you listen to 4 years of episodes and you pick out every time I've beat you up for a delayed crisis. It is the reverse.
I guess
How dare
recently...
you? Oh, no. Nope. I do not accept this.
I guess you're right. I'm remembering recently an episode where I brought up delayed crisis and you expressed massive frustration that I always reject it when you do it. So I guess that's a fair, you just get a fair representation of how it really goes.
Dare you try to gaslight me?
Dan, I don't remember things clearly enough to gaslight anyone. And I think I've proven that over and over again. I think you continually are astounded by my poor memory, and it's exhausting for both of us. You can't anymore. This is an hour and 10 minutes into an hour and 30-minute film. So I think this is pretty inarguably a delayed crisis. And it's the handoff between Carl and Wade.
Yeah.
Carl's waiting in the parking lot as Wade pulls up, and Wade gets out, and Carl is just confused and incensed, and he keeps saying, "Who the F are you?"
No Gene, no money.
Drop that money!
No Gene, no money.
And things escalate, and Carl shoots Wade in the gut. And I love the hole we see in Wade's jacket. The outerwear in this movie is spectacular. And I realize that it's just realistic costume for this environment, but that poofy hole in the coat was so interesting to me.
It's like all this padding or down or something. I don't know if he's got like a down stuffed jacket or it kind of goes poof.
Had to go through 9 layers to get to Wade. So then Wade goes down and then he shoots Carl in the face. And this is taking a Tarantino turn now. A Tarantino. So now Carl is like, again, surprised and incensed that he's just been shot in the face and he's bleeding. And then Carl fires at Wade 6 more times for a total of 7 shots. Exactly the number of shots.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Did you count? I didn't even count.
I did. So he fires. He misfires, or he fires once and misses when he goes down from the shot in the face. He's like stumbling backward, and the gun goes off.
Gun goes off.
Oh my God! I was so happy when it was actually 7 times. If you're just joining us and you haven't listened to the episode for 7. It's a recurring joke with Dan and I, and it's worth listening to that episode just to hear the origin of the 7 shots conversation. So then another great scene and another great directorial moment for the Coen brothers. Jerry is entering the parking lot as Carl is leaving. They pass each other in the parking lot, and Jerry gets to the top level and finds Wade dead. And the scene ends when he pops the trunk. Like, we don't see the typical thing where he drags him and stuffs him into the trunk and gets blood on him and can't figure out what to do. You just see the trunk pop and you're like, okay,
it's great.
We know exactly what this is going to do.
Yep.
And we never see the body again, and we never know what happens to the, like, it's just...
Is Wade just in the trunk of Jerry's car for the rest of the film?
When they capture him in Bismarck, is he still in the car? Like, what does he do with the body? So that's what I saw as the ordeal, because I don't see Marge having a real danger moment until what I consider Act 3.
Agreed.
Awesome.
In fact, I think that by the end of the film, they haven't even discovered Wade yet.
I agree. Yeah.
When Marge is talking about all the people that have died because of this, she doesn't mention Wade.
So many loose ends in this movie.
Final segment of Act 2 is the reward. Having faced Their worst fear the hero sees as the object of their quest. Obviously, there is no real reward for Marge because she didn't undergo the ordeal. The ordeal was undergone by Carl.
Yeah.
But he escapes with the money.
Yep.
The plan went bad and he is grievously wounded, and he discovers that there's a heck of a lot more money in that case than the $80,000 that he was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes $80,000 and then buries the case in the snow on the side of the road. I love this moment because he looks left, looks right down this long expanse of nothing.
Yeah.
And then just jams his ice scraper into the snow as if that's going to help him find it ever again.
He's never going to find that money.
I guess for Marge, this isn't really a reward, but it's just another lead that Officer Olsen collects from the man who is sweeping his driveway. And he talks about the funny looking guy who was looking for some lady action because he's going crazy out there at the lake. And this is now I love this exchange, by the way, but this is now two witnesses who have referred to a funny looking little fella.
Yeah.
And so they put that together, and that is what sends Marge driving around Moose Lake, where she ultimately finds the Tan Sierra. It's not a reward that she earns by surviving an ordeal, but I guess it is a reward for continuing to do the good police work.
What I love about that scene is that in any other police procedural, it would have been for the purpose only of getting that information. But that scene is so realistic about how that interview would have gone down. You know, the guy's description of getting the information has way too much detail. You know, in any other police procedure would have been, yeah, they saw the funny guy and he said he was going crazy and wanted to get, you know, that would have been it. But, you know, it's the polite greeting and the putting up of the hood and then the sort of like smattering of details and responses.
Yeah, it's just more good Coen Brothers quirkiness.
Yeah, and the accents and the environment and the place, the setting are really important to this movie. The only other thing, and this is almost a joke, the only reward I see for Jerry is that his a-hole, who he sees as his a-hole father-in-law is dead. But it's not really a reward because he's the cash cow and the money's gone. But I don't know. Maybe Jerry's relieved on some level.
Well, I think probably Jerry's expectation was, okay, good, Wade's dead. When I get Jean back, she'll be the inheritor of all of Wade's fortune, and I'm married to Jean, so I get all that money.
Well, Dan, that ends Act 2. That means it's time for us to go and have a drink.
You got that right.
Patrons, welcome to our Elixir video for this month. It's Fargo. Dan, what kind of beverage have you selected and or prepared?
I was a little worried this episode. There's not a whole lot of consumption.
Yeah.
There's some beers that Carl and Geyer drink, but I couldn't really get a good bead on what they were. But one thing that my wife reminded me of, and I'm glad you mentioned it earlier, ducks. I remembered that there is a winery called Duck Pond.
Ooh.
Got this 2019 Pinot Noir. So, in the glass, I think it's ruby. Yeah, we'll call it ruby. Color. Ooh, it smells great. Is it kind of an oaky, kind of an earthy scent? What is the bottle? The bottle suggests cherry. Okay, I got cherry. I didn't get strawberry or spice, but I definitely get some cherry in there. Ooh, there's some tannins there too. I feel like my tongue feels like I just licked a block of wood.
Put that on the bottle.
So there's some tannin, not a whole lot. It's kind of dissipated already.
Huh.
Whatever that sensation, but that's a really tasty Pinot Noir. Ooh, I'm gonna have some more while you tell us what you've got.
All right. Man, whenever you describe a beverage of any kind, I want to try it. Your descriptions are so vivid. I hope the listeners feel the same.
Licking a block of wood?
Yeah, like I just want to know what that feels like when you drink wine and the flavor and the taste, just the way you tell the story. All right. Well, I too struggled, but I did some searching and I found an infographic that named the most popular cocktail in every state in the United States. So the most popular cocktail in Minnesota, can you guess what it might be?
I can't. I don't know.
It's the Bloody Mary. So
Okay.
I made a Bloody Mary garnished with carrot, celery, olive, and a slice of bacon.
Slice of bacon. Did you just make the bacon? Is that why it took so long?
No, I made the bacon.
Or is that a bacon strip?
I made the bacon yesterday, a bacon strip. I never drink Bloody Marys. I will post the bottle of Bloody Mary mix on the website. I don't remember which Bloody Mary mix it was, but it was fancy. All right. So, smells like V8. Tomatoey with a weird bit of sweetness on the top of the smell. It doesn't smell spicy, but I have a feeling it's gonna be.
Okay.
Oh, now I smell the bacon. I just put my nose on. All right, here we go. Oh, I made it with Kettle One vodka. Ooh, the salty rim. Very salty. I don't taste the vodka at all, which makes this a dangerous pre-noon beverage.
Yeah. That's why Bloody Marys are a good breakfast beverage.
It really does taste like V8. There's a little bit of heat on like the sides of my tongue. Oh, and now I'm feeling it not like a jalapeno, but like a Tabasco, but with a little more burn. As I put my nose in the glass, what's interesting is I can smell the bacon and the celery and the carrot. So it has like this meaty vegetable aroma. Man, this is good. This is really good. It's hard to drink with all this stuff coming out of it. But
normally a Bloody Mary is served with a straw for that reason.
I don't know that I've ever ordered a Bloody Mary. I think I've had a sip of Amis, but I've never ordered one. So that explains why I'm like struggling with how you drink one. Yeah, so I recommend this. I recommend Bloody Marys.
Yeah, because of all those included items, Bloody Mary with a straw, for sure.
I've been trying to save money and go with things that I own if it's not a beer, because you can pick up a beer or a six-pack of beer for pretty cheap. But the spices necessary to make the Bloody Mary recipe I found, the 2 spices I didn't have would have cost more than a bottle of nice Bloody Mary mix. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to cheat and make and use a pre-made. But it's really good.
Risk versus reward, baby. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm already slurring my words. What is this? 13.5% alcohol by volume in this Pinot Noir. 117 calories in a 5-ounce serving.
It's not bad.
0 grams of fat. So
fat-free.
I can drink this.
My Bloody Mary does have fat in the form of bacon.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. I've got a Norm glass of wine here, and you've got the most popular cocktail in Minnesota, where most of this movie actually takes place.
All right, well, I'm going to go get a straw, and we'll continue with Act 3.
Cheers.
Well, Act 3 begins with the road back, and so that's when the hero is pursued by the vengeful forces they disturbed when they seize the object of their quest. Okay.
I would like to renew our apology to Levi and to Tasha. We'll throw David Kalikas in there, maybe Quiva. Anybody who's offended by...
I was going the other way because I feel like we haven't delivered on our promise to include the accent. So yeah, this is in Act 3. I'm going to try real hard.
You're going to do it as Gene.
That's right. Vengeful forces. Okay, so, man, there's vengeful...
There really aren't any.
No, not at all. There's no vengeance. You already mentioned that Officer Olson interviews the bartender who called in the tip, right? So this is the beginning of really the cops coming down on our bad guys, okay? Because now we know...
They're honing in.
We know that the cops know that a little funny-looking guy is out on Moose Lake.
I'm going crazy out there at the lake.
See, good. Now you're into it. I'm glad. So on her way out of town, Marge stops at Hardee's. And she's driving. She has this wistful, kind of thoughtful look on her face. And there's no indication what she's thinking about. But then her facial expression changes, and she heads back to the dealership to interview Jerry again. And she asks him to produce an inventory of cars to prove there aren't any missing vehicles. And this scene is so great.
The crime I'm investigating, the perpetrators were driving a car with dealer plates, and they called someone who works here, so it'd be quite a coincidence if they weren't, connected.
She's so polite, and he's so flustered.
I answered the darn... I'm cooperating here, and there's no...
And then she turns a little bit more harsh on him, and he just... So he finds, fine, I'll go and count right now. And then he flees the scene. He gets in his car and he drives away.
He's fleeing the interview.
So then Carl returns to the cabin to find that Gare has killed Jerry's wife. We don't see blood.
I thought he just knocked her out.
But at the beginning, when she falls down the stairs, I thought, oh, she's dead. But she's not.
Right.
So then I don't know, but they treat it so casually. Carl says, what the hell happened? And Geyer says, oh, she was, squealing.
Shrieking. She started shrieking,
So he gives Geyer his $40K, conveniently leaving out the fact that he got the whole $1 million, right? So.
But they didn't even know there was a whole $1 million.
Yeah, Geyer didn't know. And Geyer, he says, I'm going to take the Sierra. And he gets out and Geyer says, no, we got to split the Sierra. And Carl screams, I got shot in the effing face. I'm taking the car. He's like, how are we even going to split a car? He goes, one of us pays the other. And Carl
And now, because of the True Coat scene, we know the value of that car.
It's 19.4 with the discount. Carl storms out of the scene and he's walking through the snow toward the car. And just because of the angle of the shot, this is going to go down. Geyer comes out of the cabin with an axe, Jack Torrance style, another Shining reference, and just murderates Carl with the axe.
It's a great cut, too. Oh. As the axe comes down, you don't see anything, but you just hear Carl go like, ah!
Yeah, it's the trunk pop. We don't need to see the bloody murder by the axe. It's boom, this is what happens. Yeah. From here, I see resurrection. So that's where I drew the line of vengeful forces.
I love that Geyer, he's watching TV.
Oh, yeah, as a soap
opera. It's either, I was thinking, it's either Maury Povich or a soap opera.
Yeah.
Where this woman's like, I'm having your baby. And Geyer's in mid-lifting his utensil to his mouth, and he stops and stares at the TV, and his jaw drops a little bit. He's completely aghast at this whatever has just happened on this TV show.
Our psychopathic killer is emotionally invested in the show.
It's the only time he has shown any kind of emotion.
Yeah.
I love it. That moment is so great.
And when Carl comes in, Geyer stays watching the television as though Carl's an annoyance to him and interrupting his television watching. What a great choice.
He sees Carl's face and just goes back to looking at the TV.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, next segment is the resurrection, where the hero faces death one more time in a final battle or showdown. So Marge is in her Prowler, driving around Moose Lake. She's talking to Lou on the radio, where we're kind of getting a little more information. Lou is telling her that Wade Gustafson's accountant reported Jerry's wife missing, effective the same day as the homicides. So now they're all starting to put all this together, the Gustafson's in on it, and Lundegaard, and we got to look for these guys. And Lou says, yeah, we're looking. We got a APB out statewide. Everybody, we'll find him. And then Marge sees the tan Sierra. There's my car! My car!
Oh, that's such a great performance moment.
She's so excited. And Marge gets out of the car and stalks slowly around this safe house. And we start to hear this grinding, buzzing sound that gets louder and louder and louder as she gets to the back of the house.
Sound design.
And then she sees Geyer stuffing something into a wood chipper, and the snow next to the output of the wood chipper is just dark red. And you see a foot that Geyer is trying to jam deeper into the wood chipper with a block of wood. And it's just...
How he thinks that's an effective way to dispose of a body is beyond me, because he just creates all this gore and blood splashed everywhere.
But when the snow melts, all that's just going to merge with the dirt, and
I guess.
No, it's nothing.
I guess. He could have just buried it.
And it's a secluded cabin out by the lake. No one's going to be there. No one's ever going to see it.
Although it's not that secluded because she spots the car from the road. Like, it's parked right there.
Yeah, but I mean, she can't see behind the house.
The woodchipper scene is classic, and it has to be there. I'm just saying, had he buried the body, he would have been done by now, and she would have not found him right away, and he could have escaped.
No, he can't bury the body. The ground is frozen.
Anyway, not the woodchipper scene is amazing. I love it. I'm not complaining.
So Marge shouts at Gair. He notices her, starts to run across the frozen lake like he can get away.
He chucks a piece. He chucks the wood at her like that's gonna stop her.
And so just like he shoots his, I was gonna say first victim, but no, the trooper is, but the second victim.
Yeah.
As they are running across the snow away from him, Marge then shoots Gair in the back of the thigh, which sounds pretty painful.
What a shot, by the way. Marge is also a marksman.
With a pistol.
Yeah.
At that distance, too.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good distance.
She's quite a cop, Marge.
And then we cut to Gair in the back of the squad car. Marge is driving him presumably to the police station, possibly to the hospital, and she's breaking it all down. That was Mrs. Lundegaard on the floor. So now that's when we learn that he killed her.
Yeah.
Your accomplice in the wood chipper, those 3 people in Brainerd, and all for a little bit of money. Notice that she doesn't mention Wade here. So this is why I was saying that they don't even know that Wade's dead.
Really good
detail.
detail.
They haven't found him yet. And then, as you alluded to, allies being the police of Bismarck, North Dakota, they are at a motel and they arrest Jerry. So now Jerry has been brought to justice as well. And I love the desperate screaming from Jerry as he is being arrested.
Yeah.
This is not a hardened criminal.
No.
He is a desperate man who has just been thrown in a cage and he has lost his mind.
He's trying to climb out a window. They yank him back in, and it takes 2 big
in
cops.
His boxers.
It takes 2 big cops to pin him down and cuff him on that bed. He is a mad bull.
How far is he going to get in freezing temperatures
Bismarck.
outside in his boxers and a t-shirt?
Yeah, he's just, what an idiot.
All of the criminals have been brought to justice, either arrested or killed. Wraps it all up in a nice little bow. Very rare do we get that.
Yeah.
I saw that as the end of the resurrection. The wrongs committed in the first 33 minutes of the film have now been righted.
Well, yeah, and that brings us to Return with the Elixir, where the hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. So the precious treasure or reward is solving the crime and catching the bad guys. And we see Margie back in bed with Norm. We didn't talk about it much except to mention the ducks and that Norm is a painter, but he's entered his duck painting in a competition, and it has been chosen for the 3-cent stamp. And he's lamenting the fact that it's only the 3-cent stamp.
Yeah, he's disappointed.
But she's telling him he's good and that it's great and that everyone needs the 3-cent stamp when they raise the price, and then I've got all the old stamps. And it's, it's like the classic Obi-Wan line, even the smallest person can change the course of history, from Star Trek.
Oh, just
it's that meme. It's that meme.
That's that meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, how can you enrage a fandom with one line? Oh god.
So Margie's back in bed with Norm, like she was when she got the call to adventure, and everything in Margie's world is back to normal.
And she says, "Heck, Norm, we're doing pretty good."
Yeah.
And he rubs her pregnant belly and says, 2 more months.
Yeah.
So that's the freedom to live. Marge and Norm are gonna have a baby in a couple months.
Yeah.
Aww. Jeff, I have heard a superstition that the first film you watch each year sets the tone for that coming year. So what does Fargo say about 2022 for us?
Wow, I had never heard that. Triple homicide. I don't know, 11 more accent-heavy episodes of the podcast?
Okay, so 11 more apologies.
Yeah.
Ooh, and hopefully it means 11 more thank yous, like this one to Shane Nash. Shane, who just joined us on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support.
Whether you are a subscriber who plays every episode on release day or a casual listener who pops in for your favorite movies and books, or if you're brand new to the podcast, thank you for letting us spend some time with you. We appreciate everyone who clicks play on our podcast.
And if you're interested in supporting the podcast, please go to patreon.com/Heroes Journey Podcast and see if one of the tiers appeals to you. A big heap of gratitude to all patrons who make this show possible, including our demigod patrons, Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin, John Peterson Jr., Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, Salathiel Jones, and Jasmine and Pete Hudson.
Special thanks to Dean Ethington for designing our logo, Taylor Jordan for composing the Hero's Journey theme, and Jason Dorff for the episode artwork. Links to all their portfolios can be found on the About page at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
And if you have feedback you'd like to share, drop a comment on Twitter at Heroes Podcast or Instagram at Heroes Journey Podcast.
Fargo is copyright 1995 Polygram Film Productions.
Folks, in a world full of Jerry Lundegaards, be a Marge Gunderson. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
Yeah, journey on.
I knew you were going to do that.